In any Pokemon game, in order to get the diploma or certificate, you must complete the entire Pokedex, except for in Pokemon Ruby and Sapphire. Because of a programming oversight, you just don't need Chikorita in your Pokedex in Ruby and Sapphire to get the diploma. Bayleaf is unable to learn the move Sleep Powder in the main series games, however in the trading card game, there is a Bayleaf that knows Sleep Powder. In the Pokemon Adventures manga, Crystal had a Meganium named Megary that evolved from a Bayleaf during a battle with a Lugia. When Cyndaquil is hit by an attack in the first Mystery Dungeon games, it will sometimes say, "Make me angry and I'll burn you," threatening any nearby Pokemon. Nintendo of America wanted a Pokemon that started with each letter of the English alphabet. However, prior to making Quilava, there was no Pokemon that started with the letter Q. This is part of the reason why they gave Quilava its English name, which was suggested by Jeff Callis, who named many of the Generation 2 Pokemon in English. In Pokemon Legends Arceus, Hisuian Typhlosion's hidden ability is Frisk. However, in the game's internal code, it says that it has Flash Fire as its hidden ability, which is actually Jotonian Typhlosion's signature ability. Despite this, Hisuian Typhlosion cannot have Flash Fire. Totodile is unable to learn Tackle in the game, but in episode 174 of the Pokemon anime, Ash's Totodile goes for Tackle. Croconaw's English name gets picked up by the nickname center in Pokemon Black and White, so you can't trade an English Croconaw on the GTS unless you gave it an appropriate nickname. The Gator part in Feraligatr's name is spelt without the O at the end because in Generation 2 there was only a 10-character limit for Pokemon names, and Feraligatr's full name just never fit. Sentret was the only Pokemon categorized as Scout until Hisuian Growlithe came out in Legends Arceus. Also, here is a spinning Sentret from Heart Gold and Soul Silver. Furret's original shiny sprite showed it with a pink body and brown stripes in Pokemon Gold and Silver, but now Furret Shiny has a white body with pink stripes, and Furret just enjoys going for walks. I had to say it. Ken Sugimori designed Hoothoot, and in an old Nintendo Power interview, he stated that Hoothoot was his favorite Pokemon because as a kid he used to have a pet bird that also stood on one leg. A shiny Noctowl appears in the Pokemon anime as part of Ash's team, and it was the first time a shiny Pokemon was ever shown in the Pokemon anime. Ledyba is categorized as the 5-star Pokemon, but it has no stars on its body, and the spots on its back are circles instead. Many of Ledian's Pokedex entries state how it's nocturnal, however in the games with a day-night cycle, it is most commonly found in the morning. In a Nintendo World event that ran in 2003, you could get a Spinarak with growth in Pokemon Gold, Silver, or Crystal. This was the only time you were ever able to get a Spinarak with growth, as currently Spinarak cannot learn growth through any other means, and you can't even transfer over this Spinarak to newer games since it's coming from an original Game Boy game. In Pokemon Mystery Dungeon Red Rescue Team and Blue Rescue Team, Ariados sometimes says, "Don't get my head and my rear mixed up," and I don't want to see that ever happen to you, Ariados. Crobat and its pre-evolutions remain as the only Pokemon with the flying and poison type combination, which is surprising considering how long they've been around. Because of this, they are also the only poison type Pokemon in the flying egg group. In the anime, Chinchou is sometimes shown walking on land, but in the games Chinchou doesn't have a footprint and can't be encountered on land, and is most commonly found underwater. Originally, Lanturn's shiny sprite in Gold and Silver was just a different shade of blue, then from generations 3 to 5 it turned into this pinkish purple color, before returning to what it looks like closer to its original shiny colors from generation 6 onwards. If you compare Lanturn's gold shiny sprite to its home shiny sprite and then to its generation 5 shiny sprite, you can see a huge difference. And the generation 2 Pokemon as a whole have gone through some weird shiny changes that we'll talk more about later in this video. In the Pokemon Adventures manga, Yellow was the one who was responsible for naming Pichu as a species, as it was named after combining the names of its parents, which were nicknamed Pika and Chuchu. Cleffa is categorized as the star-shaped Pokemon along with Staryu. However, every Pokemon is categorized by shape with 14 generic shapes to represent each Pokemon, and Cleffa's shape looks nothing like a star, and it also has a different shape than Staryu. In Gold and Silver, Igglybuff's shiny sprite shared a very similar pink color for the body, with the distinction being a swirl on its head being green, and its butt also being green. From Generation 3 onward, they removed the green parts making it a lot harder to distinguish which Igglybuff is shiny. On the DVD for the original Mewtwo Strikes Back movie, they list Togepi as Pokemon number 152, when it's really Pokemon 175 and 152 is Chikorita. Despite how much Togepi was featured in the anime, its evolution Togetic, along with Typhlosion, are the only Generation 2 Pokemon to not appear in the Pokemon anime until after the anime moved to the 3rd generation. Natu is tied with Rookidee for being the smallest flying type Pokemon at 8 inches tall. Xatu's name is derived from the word Zat, which is a carved pole that Native Americans made as a memorial to the dead. Mareep's wool grows so quickly, and its wool is used to make high quality clothing throughout the Pokemon world. Flaffy is spelled with 2 A's followed by 2 F's, and in the Trainer's Choice section of the anime, where it asks questions about Pokemon before a commercial break, Flaffy has appeared as an option 3 different times, and each time it was missing 1 F in its name. Ampharos is often seen as a beacon to help with directions in the Pokemon world, which is backed by its Dex entry and its appearance in the Olivine City Lighthouse, and ironically in Pokemon Super Mystery Dungeon, Ampharos that leads the Expedition Society has a poor sense of direction and gets lost. In an alternative Pokemon manga series called Magical Pokemon Journey, Chapter 45 features Princess Blossom of the Flower Kingdom, who was kidnapped by a Sudowoodo of the Stone Kingdom to be his bride. Princess Blossom was eventually rescued by Pichu and Cleffa, and yeah, nothing about this manga really makes any sense. Prior to the release of Pokemon Gold and Silver, Marill was often referred to as Peekaboo, even though it wasn't its actual name. In the Topps trading cards for the Pokemon movie, they even refer to Marill as Peekaboo multiple times in the card descriptions. Azumarill is often depicted as having really good hearing. In the Mystery Dungeon games, Azumarill says how it can pick up the sound of a pin dropping from far away. Kensuke Mori created Sudowoodo for the sole purpose of being a roadblock like Snorlax was in Red and Blue. Politoed has this long piece of curled hair on its head. It is said that the longer the hair is on Politoed, the more respected it is among Poliwags and Poliwhirls. Hoppips are so light, weighing at just half a kilogram, that even a light breeze can send them flying away. Skiploom's body is that of a fat dog. It can be seen a bit easier if you remove the flower. And also, Hoppip's early design resembled that of a cat. Jumpluff, as well as its pre-evolutions, were unobtainable in all of the main series games in Generation 7, and as a result have no Dex entries from that generation. Aipom is the only Pokemon that needs to know the move Double Hit to evolve. In the official Pokemon Handbook number 3, Sunkern's height is listed as 1 inch when it's really 1 foot tall. In the Pokemon anime, Meowth sometimes disguises itself as other Pokemon. Meowth has disguised itself as Sunflora 7 times, which is more than Meowth has disguised itself as any other Pokemon before. In Pokemon Sun and Moon, Yanma can learn Leech Life through breeding, but it cannot learn it via TM. Wooper has the lowest special defense stat of all ground-type Pokemon, and it also has the lowest base stat total among ground types. Shadow Pokemon have been in Pokemon Go for a few years now, and they have these red eyes, except for Quagsire, which just doesn't have red eyes. Zubat also doesn't have red eyes in Pokemon Go, but Zubat doesn't have eyes at all. In the games, Espeon has blue ears, but in the anime, Espeon's ears are usually seen as a dark purple. In 2020, when the Pokemon Company held a Pokemon of the Year poll, Umbreon was voted as the most popular Generation 2 Pokemon and the most popular evolution overall. Murkrow is the only non-Ghost-type Pokemon that evolves with the Dusk Stone. Galarian Slowking, along with its counterpart Galarian Slowbro, are the only Poison and Psychic-type Pokemon in the game. That always seemed like such a basic and obvious pairing, but I never realized that we never got that until Sword and Shield. Misdreavus was the first mono Ghost-type Pokemon ever made, and the only Ghost-type Pokemon introduced in the 2nd generation. Despite this, the Ghost-type gym leader of Generation 2, Morty, doesn't use Misdreavus in Gold and Silver. He does, however, use a Misdreavus in Pokemon Stadium 2, but only during round 2 of the gym battles. Unown didn't originally have its question mark form and exclamation mark form until Pokemon Ruby and Sapphire, although Unown was unobtainable in Ruby and Sapphire, so you couldn't even obtain these new forms until the release of Fire Red and Leaf Green about a year later. In Generation 3, if 2 Wobbuffets with leftovers were facing each other in a single battle, the battle will be endless since Wobbuffet's moves don't do direct damage, and neither player can switch out due to Wobbuffet's Shadow Tag ability preventing that. At the time, Struggle worked differently than it did now too, so leftovers would just heal off whatever struggle damage you went for. Shadow Tag and Struggle were changed in later generations to make these Wobbuffet honor battles a bit more bearable. Girafarig has used the move Bite in the anime before, and many of its Pokedex entries state how its tail has its own brain and can bite on its own if it notices an alluring smell. Despite this, Girafarig cannot learn Bite in the main series games. Pineco is the only mono bug-type Pokemon introduced in Gen 2. Many of Fortress's Dex entries talk about its shield-like exterior, but also say that what lurks inside the shell is a mystery. Dunsparce is listed as 4 foot 11 inches tall in the games, but in the anime it appears to be much smaller than that. Some of the inspiration for Gligar's design comes from the Amakiri, which is a yokai of a flying lobster. Mega Steelix is the tallest steel-type Pokemon and tallest ground-type Pokemon, standing at 34 feet 5 inches tall. In Pokemon Diamond, Pearl, and Platinum, Snubbull swarms can happen on Route 209. Coincidentally, Snubbull's national Pokedex number is 209. Granbull, its pre-evolution Snubbull, and the Clefable line are listed as the Fairy Pokemon, even though Fairy type didn't exist when these Pokemon were introduced, and they don't exactly resemble each other outside of having kind of similar colors. This is Hugh. He is your friend in Pokemon Black 2 and White 2, and many Team Plasma grunts make fun of his hair for looking like a quillfish. Scizor was originally known as the Scissor Pokemon, which is a lot more fitting than it being the Pinsir Pokemon which is now known as. It shares this category with Kingler. Shuckle has the highest defense and special defense out of all Pokemon with 230 in both stats. Mega Heracross has the highest base attack stat of all Bug-type Pokemon with a whopping 185 attack. Sneasel is the only Dual-type Pokemon to have a Dual-type regional form that shares neither of its original types. Teddiursa is the only non-Gen 1 Pokemon that has a unique sprite in Fire Red and Leaf Green from its Ruby and Sapphire sprite. In Ursaring's official artwork, it has 4 visible claws, but in the anime and some later artwork, it has 5 claws. Slugma was introduced in Generation 2, however you can't catch one in Johto, and can only catch one in the Kanto region in Gold and Silver. Magcargo is the only Pokemon obtainable in every single Generation 3 game, including Colosseum and XD Gale of Darkness. It's also in every Generation 2 game, of course, but also in every single Generation 4 game, making Pokemon Black and White the first game where you can't catch a Magcargo since it was first introduced. The only time Swinub's eyes were ever shown was in the manga when Price's Swinub was battling a Skiploom. Piloswine, as well as Swinub and Mamoswine, are the only ground and ice type Pokemon that currently exist. Corsola is the only Gen 2 Pokemon in the Water 3 egg group, and yeah, there's 3 different water egg groups since there's so many water types. Remoraid's original design depicted it to be more like a revolver, but it was later changed to look just like a regular fish. Its evolution, Octillery, originally looked like this big armored tank, but that was also changed to just be a normal looking octopus, making it so these two Pokemon don't really look like they're part of the same evolution line. Delibird has Insomnia as its hidden ability, which prevents sleep, but it already has Vital Spirit, which does the same thing. Mantike evolves into Mantine when you have a Remoraid in your party, and Mantine can be seen with the Remoraid under its fin. The Remoraid in your party that you use to evolve it though doesn't disappear though, so this Remoraid on Mantine just comes out of nowhere. Skarmory has 140 defense, which is the highest among flying type Pokemon. Much like Slugma, Houndour can only be caught in Kanto in Gold and Silver. Houndour can only be caught in 4 main series games before beating the main game even, in Pokemon Platinum version, X version, and then Scarlet and Violet. In Gold and Silver, Houndoom's sprite has this red tint to it, but then in Crystal version that tint was removed and was never added back. In the Chong-Yi translations of the Pokemon Adventures manga, which were the English versions of the manga released in Asia, Kingdra is often mistranslated as Kingora. Phampi may look like it's small and weak, as it's only about 2 feet tall, but many of its dex entries state how it can carry a full-sized adult human. Donphan and Ursaring are the only Pokemon that have ever switched version exclusivity in international releases. Donphan is exclusive to Gold in Japan, while Ursaring is exclusive to Silver in Japan. Then for the international versions, they swapped versions. Porygon2 is the only Pokemon with a numerical number in its name. In the Gen 2 games, you can't add numbers to nicknames, so if you ever nicknamed your Porygon2, you can't change its name back. Stantler's English name was proposed to be Scaraboo, but it wasn't accepted by Nintendo of America. The only move Smeargle learns via level up is Sketch, and it's the only Pokemon that learns the same move multiple times via level up. If you were to obtain a Tyrogue in Pokemon Fire Red and Leaf Green without obtaining the national dex, it is programmed to not evolve into Hitmontop and will only evolve to Hitmonlee or Hitmonchan. Hitmontop can learn the most priority moves out of any Pokemon with 14 different priority options. In Gold and Silver, Smoochum is programmed to learn Lovely Kiss as an egg move, but no male Pokemon in its egg group can pass down Lovely Kiss. Elekid charges its electric powers by spinning its arms around like a windmill. Magby's English name is the combination of the words magma and baby. Miltank's shiny sprite used to be a white or silver-ish color until Gen 4, where it was changed to be a light blue. Blissey has an experience yield of 608 and a base stat total of 540, making it the only Pokemon to have a higher experience yield than its base stat total. Raikou's English name comes from the Japanese words for lightning and emperor, making Raikou the Lightning Emperor. There is an unused event in Gold and Silver that lets you get a level 40 Entei. This was later removed in Crystal version, and the event was speculated to be something like the third Pokemon movie. Suicune is the only member of Legendary Trio to be featured on a game's cover, where the other two members of the trio were not featured on any game's cover. Larvitar used the move Harden in the anime, but in the games it does not learn Harden. Some of Pupitar's Pokedex entries say how it creates a gas inside of its body that can be used to propel itself forward at great speeds. Tyranitar closely resembles this art by Ken Sugimori, which was made for a Japanese magazine in 1997. According to Sugimori, this monster was meant to be an original design, unrelated to Pokemon, and just coincidentally resembles Tyranitar. In an interview with Shigeki Morimoto, a Game Freak programmer, he says that they made Lugia a psychic type instead of a water type to give it a stronger impression. Hoa was seen in the first episode of the Pokemon anime, but it was also seen earlier than that, as in an August 1996 issue of CoroCoro magazine, Hoa was first revealed just 6 months after the release of Pokemon Red and Green in Japan. Celebi is the only Generation 2 Pokemon that wasn't included in the Generation 2 Pokérap.